So let's be real. You probably don't need to take all this stuff with you fishing. Sure, it's nice to have all this fishing gear, but the reality is it's probably holding you back.
On the munchie, dude!
Tat. Freaking monster.
Guys, 21-inch smallmouth.
So you're definitely taking too much stuff with you on the water. And I used to be the worst at it. In fact, I own more fishing gear than I know what to do with if my garage is any indication of the problem that I have. So let's talk about fishing gear. First, grab our favorite seat. So about once a year, I like to make a video talking about my gear choices and the reason behind them. For longtime viewers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I used to do this thing where it was called the 4-rod system, where I had 4 tiers of fishing rods that I would take with me. Don't care about reels. Reels are pretty interchangeable. But when it came to rods, I like to keep it simple on the kayak. Now, when I first cut my teeth on fishing, I started from the bank. And I think when I got into the kayak, you know, I didn't go from bank to kayak. I went from bank to boat to kayak, back to some bank, back to kayak. So I've been everywhere, and I've kind of experienced the urge, is the best way to describe it, that once you get off the bank, you get into a boat, you want to bring a ton of stuff. You get really conditioned that a boat can take a lot of stuff. And it's much less of a problem on a boat than, let's say, a shore angler or kayak angler, where space is obviously limited. So it took me a few years to finally get to this point. Well, what point is that? That is the point of I don't bring as much stuff with me anymore. So like I mentioned, I had a 4-rod system that I swore by. After I sort of experimented with the kayak, I went all in. I had anchor wizards, I had power poles, I had 5 or 6 to 12 rods on the kayak. Massive black packs I didn't need. And I'm not gonna repeat a lot of the kayak specific stuff for this because I think it's like been done in other videos, but the last 6 months, the goalpost has shifted for me ever so slightly. And what I mean by that is I realized even more so, the more I went on these river trips, the more and more I was able to refine what I think truly could cover all the bases when it comes to, we'll say kayak fishing, but also bank fishing. I'm holding 3 rods right here, and I could easily take these on the bank and do a long bank thing where you're walking all day, which I do that all the time on big lakes, and you could get away with that. And this would cover everything you ever wanted to throw, you could ever dream of, with except maybe like a high-end swim bait, which is a completely specialized thing. But the reason I've chosen these rods is that these rods are all in the same lineup. These are all Shimano Exprides. And I want to preface this a little bit and say that you do not need to go out and buy 3 Shimano Exprides, which retail from like $200 to like $300. They're an expensive high-end rod. They're probably my favorite high-end rod, truthfully, because they feel like a G Loomis NRX, but they're like half the price, especially if you can find them on sale. So that's just why we're using that. There are plenty of rod brands out there that have similar systems where you could take it from the top series. So like Dobbins is a great example, the Champion Extremes, and it trickles down all the way into their low end stuff. And those rods, while having different components and different parts and eyelets and different epoxies and build quality, their actions tend to stay similar across the board. So that's why I've chosen these, just because I know that I have 3 Exprides that fill the void of 3 rods that could pretty much do everything. So let's talk about them. So winter to me is a great time to talk about fishing gear because we get to look at the season in the past and kind of assess overall, like, how did it go? What were some of the lessons we learned? And as I sort of foreshadowed at the beginning of the video, I learned something over the last 6 months that I was taking anywhere from, let's just say, 4 to 6 rods. So I was breaking my own rule of a 4-rod system a little bit. Now there's a reason behind that. I wanted to, for one, test more, and for 2, I was exploring a lot of new areas where I was really unsure about. And on a kayak, especially on the river, which I think the river forces you into this mindset where less is more, because the more you take, the more it's going to impact your performance and overall ability to maybe navigate some of this stuff. When you have a bunch of rods behind you, it can be really annoying, really slow you down, make some of the traversing annoying. So, you know, having 3 to 4 rods is really the sweet spot. But here's really what I'm getting at. I learned that you could get away with just 1 rod sometimes, which is crazy because when you go into a fishing trip, how do you plan it? You go into it thinking like, okay, I'm gonna throw this, 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 and this, right? It's like jerkbait, finesse rig, jig, and then I wanna have a backup rod. But wait, what if they're eating topwater? I need to make sure I have a topwater rod. And then if they're not eating topwater, what if I don't have a big swim bait rod? See, I stopped thinking like that. I always go to the water knowing the couple things that I really wanna focus on, but I never worry about what ifs, because that's something the fish will tell you about when you get to the water. So let's talk about the rods and why I'm choosing. I'm gonna start with the bottom. I found myself always seeming to lean on 1 or 2 rods, no matter how many rods I brought. And it was always coming back to the same thing, which is a reoccurring theme in all these videos. It's having a versatile spinning rod. This is the Expride 7-foot medium spinning rod. You can put whatever 2,000 to 3,000 size spinning reel you want on this, doesn't matter. This rod can do almost everything you could possibly want out of a spinning rod. It's a great Neko rig rod. It's a great wacky Cinco rod. I've won a lot of money on this rod. In fact, a lot of the success I had in 2023 on the national scene was using this rod to flip docks, flip, you know, little swim baits and wacky Cincos and stuff into places that were very small. This is a great skipping rod. 7 foot is arguably the most universal length. And I think a bank angler could pick up this 7-foot medium and love it. A kayak angler, obviously, like myself, is gonna love it. But like you boat guys, which, you know, when I first got this rod, because I have the original version of this as well, which is the Expride A, the original Exprides with like the foam grip instead of the monocoque handle, which this is a huge improvement. If you haven't seen these, I actually started in the Zodias for them, and then they kind of worked their way up, which is kind of odd because, you know, usually it's the other way around. But like I said, like I loved this on my boat when we would take it out. It was just for flipping, you know, bed fishing. If you're into that, it's a great little like pitching rod for bed fishing. So it is just a universally great rod. And if you've seen my kayak rod videos, I maintain that there is no such thing truly as a kayak rod. But if I had to take 1 spinning rod with me for the rest of my life, let's say I cannot pick anything else, it has to do everything, I would take this one, because you could throw small topwaters on it as well, small crankbaits, jerkbaits. So find yourself a versatile spinning rod. I do want to say, however, because I feel like I'd be cheating if I don't mention this, if you don't like spinning rods, and let's say you're a BFS guy, you know I like BFS, I've done several videos on it. The Kestrel combo that I use, fantastic replacement for a spinning reel, if that's your jam. I have a video coming out soon about whether or not I think these can replace a spinning reel, and it's actually kind of interesting, but I personally would rather have the spinning reel if I had to just choose one. But there are a lot of things that I love about BFS, and if it's something that floats your boat, it could absolutely do a lot of those things we just talked about. So a BFS combo could potentially replace a spinning reel if that's more of your speed. Not for me though. All right, moving along here, we're going to my favorite rod. This actually, I say favorite, like I have a lot of favorite jerkbait rods, but this one is the king of the crop. I caught my PB smallmouth on it this year. My old PB smallmouth was on it. I've caught tons of fish on this rod. This is the Expride 610 medium. It is very similar in action, in my opinion, to the spinning reel, but it's got a very crisp tip. I don't know how well the camera's gonna pick that up, but it's got a very crisp tip because it is a jerkbait rod. It's that extra fast, crisp tip. Why do I like this rod? Well, I wanna show you guys something. This is a jerkbait rod. Look at what I got tied on. Yep, that is a jig, a finesse jig. It is a very, very, very good finesse jig rod. And one common misconception about jerkbait rods is that they aren't sensitive, but every jerkbait rod that I've used that's been good has been super sensitive. You can feel them come up and tick the jerkbait. So I learned a few years ago how good these rods were for throwing small little jigs. And that's what I love about it. You can throw small topwaters on this, poppers, small spinner baits even, like this Booyah 3/8 of an ounce finesse, you know, as I like that. You could throw small little topwaters like buzz baits that are harder to throw. This is a great small buzz bait rod. This is a great jerkbait rod, obviously. I don't even know why I have to say that. It is probably the best jerkbait rod I've ever used. Oh man, what else can it do? Wacky worms, I've thrown wacky worms on it. If you like throwing wacky worms on a bait casting combo, this is great. It's a great small paddle tail. So you're seeing that there are a little bit of redundancies here with the spinning reel. And I think that if you're gonna go out and do a lot of the things that I talked about, but then do none of the things that this is designed for, like jerkbaits and topwater, it almost makes sense like to pick your preference and not take either the spinning reel or this combo, because there's some overlap there. And that's what I was getting at the beginning of the video. Yes, we're talking about 3 rods here today, but the reality is I kept finding myself only using 2, and it helped my fishing. I feel like I caught more and more fish this season because I was willing to downsize in how much gear I brought and just focus on a couple combos and focus on what the fish were doing, not what I think they should be doing. And taking less rods really helped me with that. So this is the redundancy that I really wanted to hammer home, that sometimes that spinning rod and a rod like this Expride 610 medium extra fast can really overlap. So if you're not going to do both of those things in a day, it might make a lot of sense to cut one of the 3 rods we're talking about, which I did on my last trip. So we're gonna wrap this up with the final Expride, which is the Expride 7'2" medium heavy. Now, if you've watched any of my videos, chances are you've seen me use this rod to catch fish in various ways. At the upper Mississippi, to throw chatterbaits. I caught probably close to 100 fish in the upper Mississippi on chatterbaits with this rod. I own a chatterbait rod. I own a dedicated IMX Pro bladed jig rod, the 873 bladed jig rod. I chose to use this. This fall, I threw mag drafts on this. Caught some very nice fish on mag drafts on this rod. I've thrown jigs on this rod. I've thrown topwaters on this rod. In fact, I think it's a phenomenal, and I mean phenomenal, topwater rod. But what I really like this rod for is the ability to throw spinnerbaits and to throw them in long distances. Now, one of the things that I like in this system is that when I'm choosing rods, I like to have a 7'2". I like to have that over rod. So if I'm gonna take only a couple rods, I always like to make sure I have at least one rod with me that can really reach out there. And a 7'2" rod, while 2 inches doesn't seem like a lot, it can go a long way at the end of a rod. Then that's a Gary Dobbins quote. He didn't quite say it like that. I won't say it for this because it's not PG friendly, but 2 inches goes a long way. That's all I'm gonna say. And the 2 inches on this rod really does help you kind of make some bomb casts. And one of the themes you might notice is from top and bottom of this is that I'm picking rods that can do a lot of things by purpose. And there's some redundancies to this video and my kayak specific rod video, but the reality is I think that as anglers, if we would just focus on 1 or 2 rods per trip, really kind of hammer at home what we think will cover the bases for any given day based on the conditions, the weather, the time of year, water clarity, stuff like that. I think you could get away with just realizing that you don't need to own as many combos. So 7'2" medium heavy, caught more fish on this rod probably than any rod I own this year. So while ultimately there's gonna be a lot of personal preference when we really figure out which rods we wanna use, and I have to imagine a lot of the lake guys are gonna watch this video and be like, nah dog, I'm taking my 7 or 8 rods with me. But I think that even as a lake angler, as someone who fished the national scene the last 3 seasons, I can tell you, even on the national trail, a lot of times there was like that 3 rods that I always gravitated towards. And sure, it was nice to maybe be like, oh, you know what? I saw some big shad busting over there. Let me pull out my swim bait. But 99% of the time, that just didn't happen. And I just had this extra rod that was in the way. And seconds matter while in the water. You'd be surprised how much you gain by taking less. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this very, very quick look at the 3 rods that I think were just like my all-stars this year. That's what we're looking at here. The all-star rods for me, the 3 rods that I was like, okay, These 3 rods, if I could just take these, I could pretty much do anything I ever wanted. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with this system. If you can figure out, you know, the 3 rods that really work for you, you can figure out the 2 rods that really work for you. And then at the end of the day, you can figure out the 1 rod that actually makes sense for the conditions and the time. And before you know it, you're probably catching more fish because you're not worried about whether or not you brought the right combos. Plus, it'll save you money. And that's an important thing. I'm trying to downsize. I think you guys should too. We don't need as much gear as I've got in my office. It's actually kind of ridiculous. And I'm actually in the process of getting rid of a lot of it. So that's it. Those are my 3 rods. Let me know what you guys think. If you could only pick 3 rods to take with you, which 3 are you picking? I'll see you guys next time.